everybody, Chris the Up North Air Gunner. So today we are here with the FX Dynamic, and I put together a custom build just for this video today because this has been a video that I've been wanting to do for a really long time. If you've been following my adventures here on Up North Air Gunner, you know that I'm big into big bore air gun hunting, doing a lot of stuff with deer hunting, a lot of big game hunting with my air guns. And I wanted to put this together because I've had a lot of questions and we've had a lot of conversations online in the community groups about the effects of the barrel length on the performance of your air gun. And so when I first got into big bore air guns, you know, for me, I got into it because I wanted to go deer hunting. And I really wanted to find all the different ways that I can basically increase all the power and performance out of my air gun. And I found out right away, there's a few ways you can do that. A lot of times with big bore air guns, we talk a lot about putting a lot more pressure, a lot more fill pressure, and a lot of times it's an unregulated air gun. So every shot you're taking, you're losing velocity, but those first few shots, you're just kind of eking out all the potential power that's in the air gun at that given air pressure. But with FX, these are regulated air guns, which means every shot should be very close to the exact same velocity and the exact same power shot to shot. So with pressure, one of the big things that we don't talk about a lot in air guns is that as you increase pressure, the actual weight of the air means that you're actually pushing more mass shot to shot. And sometimes it can be actually equal or more of the actual grain weight of the projectile that you're shooting. So a lot of these big bore air guns, when they're at like 3,000 PSI or 3,600 PSI, or some of the really big bore air guns are at 4,500 PSI. So you're actually pushing a significant amount of grain weight of air every single time you're trying to increase that air pressure as you're trying to eke out more power. But with FX, they're really trying to do more with less. And so with the new dynamic and the dynamic valve and the new valving system in this thing, I wanted to put together the special build to kind of prove this point. So with air guns, and a lot of times when you're first getting into the sport of air gunning, a lot of us are coming from firearms. And so with firearms, all that potential energy is actually stored in that cartridge, and it's being released through a chemical reaction right away, and all the energy is being expelled as it's pushing the projectile down the barrel. And so here recently, I really was very intrigued by MDT, who put out this really awesome video. So what they did is they actually took a 4-foot long barrel and they started cutting off sections 1 inch at a time to see if that really long barrel would, increase velocity, what kind of effects it would have like on the standard deviation and the extreme spread of the velocity with that really long barrel. So as they cut it back further and further, they documented the results. So when I saw that video, I immediately knew I wanted to do this video because I really wanted to show you guys what are the effects of barrel length when it comes to air guns. And also the question becomes, what is the perfect length of barrel that you would want to run in your air gun rig? And quite honestly, the answer to that question really depends on what you're trying to do. So obviously we would like to have shorter barrels because it's, more maneuverable. It's easier to get, in and out of a case. It's easier to maneuver in the woods. But for my goals as an air gunner, I really like to have as much power as possible because I'm either doing any kind of hunting, big game hunting, or long range shooting. So in order to get there, there's a couple different ways we can get there. We can get there with increased pressure or with barrel length. And there's also, if we really want to get into the details, there's other things you can do like try helium and things like that I've actually tried here on my channel, which I don't recommend. But also the valve efficiency. So for this test, I wanted to pick the most advanced airgun valving system that I have access to, which is the FX Dynamic. And in this system, they've actually changed quite a bit of the valve in this as compared to the FX Impact M3. Not a lot of people know this when this first came out. They just saw the numbers and didn't really understand why. Is really the valving system in this is completely different. You've got this large plenum that's over the barrel here, and this does help a lot in getting those higher power levels, because basically every shot to shot, you're drawing upon the air that's in the plenum. This is all regulated pressure versus off your pressure that's in the bottle, or in this case, I actually have a 700 bottle here up front from Utah Air Guns as well. So your air source is coming from this bottle and this bottle, but the regulated pressure is coming from all the volume of air that's in here. And so to run this test, I'm going to be doing this at a pretty relatively low air pressure when it comes to big bore air guns. I'm going to be doing it at 170 bar as compared to other big bore air guns that I have there on my rack. Some of them are 200 bar, which is 3,000 PSI, all the way up to 250 and even 300 bar, which is 4,500 PSI in some of those bigger ones. So we're going to be doing this at a lot lower pressure, but we're going to be relying on the efficiency of the valve and the barrel length. So look at this thing. So in this test, what I wanted to do is I wanted to compare what I have in this is an 800 millimeter barrel. So I worked with my buddies Ernest and Newman over there at FX to come up with this ridiculously long rifle. But how ridiculous is this? I mean, it looks absolutely crazy long. So if I compare this to other big bore air guns like I have in my collection, like the Air Force Texan or the AEAs, they're all kind of running around that same length. So this is sitting right at 4 feet long. And if that sounds long to you, and that, I can't use that, it's way too long, I can't maneuver that in the woods. Guys, seriously, if we look back in history, most long rifles that were actually used in the military around the turn of the century in the early 1900s, a lot of those guns were exactly that same length. But you're like, oh yeah, but there's never been any kind of air guns that would be that long. Well, guess what? Lewis and Clark and the Girardoni air rifle, the one that actually won the West as they moved westward, guess what? That was pretty much the exact same length as what we're using here today. So, this is not unprecedented that we're running an air gun this long. Yeah, so as compared to the MDT test where they took that 4 foot long barrel and they were starting to cut 1 inch lengths off and they were documenting the results, we're going to actually work in reverse. I'm going to be taking the 500 millimeter kit, putting it into this air gun, and what we're going to be doing is going from 500. I'm actually going to skip the 600 millimeter length, and we're just going to extrapolate the results that we get. Then we're going to go to the 700 millimeter length, and then we're going to finish off with the 800 millimeter length. So I kind of knew how the results were going to pan out, but I was extremely surprised on some of the details of those results. And so to kick this off, let's go ahead and start with the 500 millimeter barrel and see what kind of performance we're getting at 170 bar with that tungsten hammer, the 500 millimeter barrel length. So we're going to be using the FX Hybrid 68 grain slugs, and let's see what kind of baseline performance we can get with that 500 millimeter really short barrel kit. Let's check it out. All right, so we've got some 68 grain hybrids here. We've got the 500 millimeter barrel kit on the Dynamic. We've got it cranked up here to 170 bar. And what we want to do here is just get a baseline of what kind of power we can expect with the 35 cal with hybrids. And it's got the tungsten hammer in this thing, so I'm pushing this as about as hard as it'll possibly go. Let's see what kind of velocities we get. Here we go. God, that is loud. What we see as a baseline with the 500 millimeter barrel, we're getting, let's just say, call it 950 feet per second with the 68 grain hybrids for, let's say, we'll call it 135 foot-pounds of energy. And now, as we add longer barrels, as we get to the 600 millimeter, the 700, and moving on to the 800 millimeter kind of like prototype test barrel that I've put together, I know we will see some kind of increase in this. I'm just not sure what, but I think with this short pulse valve that they have in here, we're definitely going to see an increase. So yeah, let's move it up to the 700 and then the 800 and see what we can get. All right, so at 500 millimeters, we're still getting 950 feet per second with those 68 grain slugs. So that's pretty decent power off of such a short, compact rig for a big bore air gun. So the next part of this test, we moved up to the 700 millimeter barrel. And so check this out. Based on all my testing across pretty much all air guns that I have, I've been seeing between 5 to 10 feet per second per inch of barrel. So let's see what this 700 millimeter does. So check that out. That is a significant increase between 500 to 700 millimeters. And again, here in America, we work in inches. So every 100 millimeters of barrel is roughly 4 inches, 4 inches of length every 100 millimeters. So we're basically going right under 8 inches of barrel length between that 500 to that 700. And you're getting that much more velocity, energy and power, and we're seeing a huge increase as we go up in barrel length. As compared to that MDT test, they weren't seeing those results at all, as they were kind of lopping off that barrel, but really all that potential energy that's in that cartridge that's being released, they really didn't see a lot of difference. But with air guns, we see a huge difference as we go longer in length. So at 700 millimeters, right, with those 68 grain slugs, we're slinging a lot of power. But what happens when we go up to 800? Let's check that out. All right, so check this out. 68 grain hybrids. My regulated setup here, just want to show you. I have it topped out. It actually quit gaining velocity at 170 bar, but I just bumped it up to about 175 there. You'll see it's just a little bit past the 170, and that is what's giving me that insane spread. So even though I'm basically maxing out at velocity at 170, giving that little bit of extra back pressure on the hammer, and again, I've got this maxed out at 23 here, and on the micro all the way out, so the trigger sear will still catch. But at that, by just bumping it up that extra 5 bar, giving that little bit of extra back pressure is what puts that valve in complete harmony. I see where it stops basically going up, and then I would just eke it up just another 5 bar. And with this new dynamic valve, that is what you can expect, because I've been able to do this with multiple different slug weights. That's absolutely awesome. Okay, so that 10-shot string, was that just a fluke to get that very tight standard deviation and extreme spread of velocity? Or is this something that we could expect over many shots? Check this out. Okay, so after all those groups, those 5-shot groups, I'm hovering right there at 1,100 feet per second for 183 foot-pounds of energy with those hybrids, 68 grain hybrids. But look at this. 31 shots with an extreme spread of 6 with a standard deviation of 1.49. That is insane. All right, so that's absolutely crazy. We're going from 950 feet per second with the 500 millimeter barrel all the way up to 1,100 feet per second with those hybrid slugs with the 800 millimeter barrel. That is absolutely insane. And what's crazy, what you're seeing as we're going with these longer length barrels, my theory is as you're getting longer, you're actually kind of evening out that standard deviation and that extreme spread of your velocity, which is really what you want with long range shooting. You want every shot to be as close shot to shot in velocity, because at long range, 100, 200, 300, 400 yards and beyond, every foot per second, 5 feet per second. And sometimes when you look at the firearms, I mean, sometimes their standard deviations, they're like in 6. Their extreme spreads are like 20, 30 sometimes. I got ammo, some standard velocity 22 long rifle. I can get extreme spreads of 50 sometimes. So at long ranges, that makes a huge, huge difference. So with air guns, we have the extreme advantage of getting that standard deviation and that extreme spread of that velocity super, super tight. So now we have a provable science and the physics behind all of this. As we go longer with barrels, we're also getting provable increases in velocity. Now, with this short burst valve that FX has, as compared to some other big bore air guns, where the back pressure of that slug is actually holding the valve open longer, and so they're able to get more energy just by holding that valve open longer, this actually has a very short burst valve in this, and so it's not being held open by the back pressure of that slug. So it's basically opening and closing exactly the same amount every single time, and that's what you want for consistency, and that's what you want for precision at long range. So as you see the data in here, as it got between 700 and 800 millimeters of barrel, it actually started leveling out. So I bet you if we went out to like 900 or 1,000 millimeters, which we wouldn't want to do because now it's just becoming way too long, you're probably going to start seeing that level out. But at 800, we're still gaining velocity and foot-pounds of energy out to 800 millimeters. But what can we do with all of that power? So the science behind all this, that's all fine and good, just to prove the science and the data behind this. But what do we want to do with that power? And I can tell you right now, what's my goal in this by building this custom rig is I have always wanted to deer hunt with the FX Impact M3, the FX Dynamic, but it was always right on that edge of foot-pounds of energy that just made me a little bit leery about going out and shooting deer with this. So if we took those 68 grain slugs, what if we put some really long, heavy slugs into this thing to see what kind of maximum foot-pounds of energy that we could get? So check this out. So we're shooting these 168 grain NSA slugs. Check this out. Look at that spread and standard deviation. Spread of only 5 over 10 shots with a standard deviation of 1.48 for over 253 foot-pounds of energy. Insane. That's awesome. All right, so at over 250 foot-pounds of energy, I can tell you for sure that is deer hunting ready. And the reason why I can tell you that is the first 2 years that I was deer hunting with big bore air guns, I was hunting with 128 to maybe 150 grain slugs. And I think I put down 6 deer in those first 2 years of hunting with big bore air guns at that exact same power level. Now, most of my shots were 50 yards and in, and that's really what you want to do, because as you start getting out there, you are going to be losing some energy. So 50 yards and in that power level, this is definitely an ethical power range for deer hunting. As a matter of fact, in the state of Texas, I believe their minimum foot-pounds of energy is 215. So even with an unmodified 700 barrel that you can actually go and get at Utah Air Guns right now, that will be at that Texas legal level of 215 foot-pounds of energy, and probably even a little bit more, as long as you're running that tungsten hammer in this rig and about 170 bar. Now, another thing, I've been deer hunting with big bore air guns since 2017, and I have learned a lot about terminal performance of your ammunition. So when I first got into this, I love the fact that we have hollow points. We have tons of great hollow point manufacturers for our 35 cals. And, we all like seeing, that massive expansion of slugs. I mean, it's sexy, right? We love seeing that hollow point just opening up like a huge flower, dumping all that energy. But I can tell you, if you want to hunt deer, it's all about penetration. Ideally, you want to get through both lungs, and you really want to get an exit on the backside if you really want to. And I've heard people say, well, yeah, but you're dumping all that energy, and if it goes out the backside, you're wasting all that energy. Guys, I have shot quite a few deer at even like that 600 to like 900 foot-pounds of energy levels. And it's basically like a large handgun load, okay? We're not talking about a 308 or a 6.5 Creedmoor or a 7mm. I mean, the kinetic energy that's dispatching these animals, it's about the penetration. You have to think about it more like archery, where you really want to get through both of the vitals, both of the lungs, out the backside. And what you're doing is that thoracic cavity within the heart-lung area, when you basically ventilate both sides of it, that negative pressure that's in that chest cavity is basically collapsing on the lungs. The lungs can inflate, and that deer won't go 50 yards. It's going to go down. Very ethical shot. So in order to do that, you really need to know what your ammunition is doing at the point of impact. And so I have done a ton of testing on this topic, and I will tell you, as much as I love the FX hybrids, do not, and I repeat, do not use them to deer hunt. You really want to have a flat nose solid would be a perfect slug, or if maybe you're using a suede slug that really doesn't open up a lot, really is going to be the ideal slug so you can get that penetration. So to prove this point, I wanted to do some terminal performance testing, and the best thing I can do is I've done a lot of gel testing. The only thing gel is good for when you're doing this kind of terminal performance testing, gel is kind of like, it's kind of like using like a yardstick or a ruler or a standard measuring device, okay? So as I'm shooting into gel, as I'm shooting from one projectile to the next, or if I'm comparing one against the other, so what I'm typically doing is I'm only sitting about 10 yards away from that gel, and I'm shooting into it, and I'm comparing the penetration and the expansion of the slugs but it's just so I have a common medium to shoot into so I can compare the penetration and the expansion of those slugs. It really does not mimic very well at all of what's happening inside a game animal, whether you're hitting the fur, the hide, the bones, the meat, the internal organs. It's really, you need to shoot into something that is like that. And so for the medium that I chose on this one is actually pork ribs do a really good job of mimicking what a deer would do. And I'm using spaghetti squash to basically mimic the heart-lung zone. So, all right, so what we got set up here is we're gonna take a shot at 50 yards. And at 50 yards, that's about my average. I was looking through all my kill shots and all my deer hunting I've been doing over since 2017. 50 yards is about my average. I've taken some longer. Most of them are kind of like in that 30 to 40 yard range, but 50 yards is gonna be a good test here for penetration. So we got 2 racks of ribs, 2 spaghetti squash to represent kind of like lung and tissue and organs. And let's see what kind of penetration we get. Here we go. Let's see what we got here. So there was my entry right there. Blew out the backside here. Looks to have some pretty decent expansion there. Good size hole here. Really good size hole there. Came in through here. Oh, it's still going. Out the back side of the second lung. Oh yeah, did we get a full penetration? Yes, we did. Look at that. That right there at 50 yards. That's a dead deer right there. All right, for this test, we're going to be shooting the hybrids just to show you why these are not, and I repeat, not the best option when you're shooting larger game animals. I'm guessing we're probably going to get through the ribs into that one, maybe barely through that one. But yeah, when these things open up, they turn into meat parachutes. So, all right, let's check it out. All right, so let's see what we got here. We've got the entry right there. And there's the first exit. I don't see any other exit holes, so definitely not a full penetration. And like I said, that's gonna be just dumping that energy in the first few inches. So there's the entry. There's the, oh man, look at that. That is absolutely wicked. And then that is going into the first lung. See if it made an exit out of there. Oh, yep. I might have turned a little bit. So it came out the back side. And did it go in here? There's no penetration. So it's basically just broke off that top layer. Did not even enter the second one. So let's see if we can find the slug. Oh, we got some slug remnants here. Look at this. See, when those mushroom out, they just turn into little flying saucers of destruction. But that right there is a video demonstration of why those hybrids and massively expanding hollow points, really. I mean, even if that was a heavier hollow point that was opening up, a lot of that time it's just dumping all that energy into that first lung and not getting into the second lung or even through the second lung. All right, let's see what we got here. Trying to capture one of those hybrid slugs just to show you what's going on with the terminal performance. So there's the entry, there's the exit, went back in through there. Oh, there it is right there. So hit that back, look at that. It didn't even have enough energy after passing both of those spaghetti squash to even break the plastic. So there we have a fully mushroomed hybrid, so you can see what's going on the inside. That's dumping about 200 foot-pounds of energy for sure, but the penetration is
Just not what we want for big game hunting. So coyote, holy cow, that would be wicked. But a deer, no.
All right, so there it is. That right there is probably the best visual evidence that I can show you here on my channel of what type of ammunition, slugs, and terminal performance that you're going to be wanting when you're deer hunting. So again, the FX Dynamic, well, this is getting the absolute most amount of energy that I can get at 170 bar. Even though you can't get this into this as a custom rig, you can go get the 700 millimeter. And if you want to go deer hunting, again, put tungsten inside this 170 bar. You are at Texas legal deer hunting power. All right, so there it is, everybody. I hope you really enjoy this video. It's something that I've been wanting to do for a long time. Talk to you guys about the effects of the barrel length. And you're going to probably say, but man, that is super loud. That's not why I got into air gunning. That thing is not backyard friendly. So first off, shooting 35 cal air guns shouldn't be shot in your backyard if you've got neighbors around anyway. But if you are looking to reduce the shot report in those things, this right here is what you're going to want to go to. And I'm going to be covering this in another upcoming video because this right here is the most advanced airgun suppressor that I've tested. And this is the Donnie FL Yokozuna. So this right here will make this gun right here go from a crazy echoing in the woods. That is loud. And so definitely stay tuned for the video here on the Donnie FL Yokozuna. So thanks everybody for joining me. I hope you enjoyed the video. Get out there and do some shooting. Take care.
Yeah, baby. Hey.